Peter Potter. I live now at Elmstead Market, just outside Colchester. At one time, I lived at Fobbing, Stamford-le-Hope, and also Grace and Purfleet. My father was a farmer, and because of him being a farmer and me being a farmer's son, I was in a reserved occupation at the start of the war. So I had to run away from home and worked at Shellhaven to give myself a different background so that I could then volunteer for the RAF. Once I had done enough time at Shellhaven, I volunteered at Grays to join the aircrew in the RAF. As you see there is the photograph of me at Boxted at the end of the war, and the memorabilia here are all things I picked up during my service. I have my cousin's stuff up there. The cigars, there are 3 cigars of Romeo and Juliet, which were presented to Major William Matthews by Winston Churchill. Bill died in, I believe, 1979, and in the Chronicle is his obituary somewhere. I cannot give a specific date. He was a very well-known person. He's now buried in the cemetery at Worley, the regimental chapel. This lower stuff is almost my own. That was my Lancaster. Which I flew from a station called Wickenby in Lincolnshire. The number of the station was 23, and these materials at the bottom are just normal things. I even have in there a license to ride a bicycle. The odds and ends, of course, well, as I was promoted, here is a list of every airfield in England or Britain during the war. I have a 100,000 mark note, which I picked up after VE Day, and I had 2, which I bought for 200 American Camel cigarettes. One was two of these were cashed by German banks after the war for £30,000 each, but I missed out, and they became non-legal tender. The notes here are for well, they were given service currency, which was used throughout the occupied territories after the war, and to replace the local currencies, probably the first euros, which I hope to see the back of very soon. I came to Boxted in 1945 and remained here until the station closed. I was a liaison officer taking over from the American Air Force. And I felt this was a very enjoyable station for me, most comfortable, close to home, because I lived at Mersey Island, and I don't think I could have found a better service station at that time. I was given more or less freelance jobs. Became in the, while I was here, I was flying control, catering, admin, and any other job that came up where the person I replaced was being demobbed. But I enjoyed it very much. I was friendly with the CO and also quite a few of the other personnel who used to come visit my parents at Mersey and were made welcome. The CO of this station moved to Dedham. My immediate superior, Squadron Leader Graham, became the art master at Colchester Grammar School, and he also moved to Dedham. A very, very nice gentleman, and I worked with him for many years. Well, I say many years, a couple of years anyway, and I thoroughly enjoyed all the time I served at Boxted, and from here I moved to Wattisham, where I was demobilised. Well, I ran away from home to enable me to volunteer for the for the RAF, and of course volunteering for aircrew meant that I could not be put on any other occupation or service. This was all I wanted to do was fly, and I was called up to St John's Wood. St John's Wood, where the centre for all aircrew admissions. The place I went to first of all was Grove Court, and across the road was Hamilton Court, where we ate. They were luxury flats, which was a lovely introduction to the RAF. The food didn't come up to the luxury flats, I'm afraid, but we still had a good time there. I then moved on to Bridlington, where I had continuing of the training, and that was my first introduction to the peeling potatoes in the cookhouse, on fatigues as they called them. While we were at Bridlington, one of our chaps was given a few pounds by one of his relatives, and he went out and had a little too much to drink. On his way back to the quarters that night, he managed to fall into what was called an emergency static water tank. And of course, the emergency static water gradually got to the point where it didn't smell very nice. A couple of WAFs pulled him out and brought him back to the station. He was very well gone, but the chaps in the billet wouldn't allow him into the billet. They stripped him, took him, put him under one shower and his clothes under the other, and left him there. A couple of hours later, I came back to the station and took him into the billet. He was well washed by that time, and I put him to bed. One of the other chaps went and got his clothes. In the morning, he had to put his best blue on to go on parade, because the other clothes obviously weren't suitable and still wet. The corporal instructor decided to take us all on a assault course, which meant that his best blue was well muddied. And the next day, after he had taken almost all night sorting his clothes out, the poor chap turned up on parade and was put on fatigues in the cookhouse for about, I think, 3 days, purely and simply because his uniforms weren't up to scratch. From Bridlington we moved to Sandtoft and Lindholm, where we continued training, then on to Bridgnorth in Shropshire, where we did quite a bit of square bashing. Then on to Pembrey in Wales, where I finished my training and became a sergeant. When I joined up, I received 18 shillings a week. After 3 weeks, I was promoted to an LAC, which gave me 6 and 6pence a day, and as a sergeant, I never became a corporal, but as a sergeant, I got 15 and 6pence a day, which was quite a good sum. From there on, I went to Hickson, where I met my crew. My crew consisted of 4 Canadians and the 3 of us who were English. Oh, sorry, 1 was Welsh. We then moved to Hounslow. Oh, by the way, at Hickson, I did my first operation, which was to Paris, where we were attacked by a fighter. Yeah, we moved to Hexton, where I found my crew and formed my crew, and from there we went to Hemswell in Lincolnshire and finished, or rather learned to fly on 4-engined aircraft, and then we moved to Wickenby on Lancasters, 33 operations, 30 of them with my own crew and 3 with other crews. Two of them were unofficial because I took the place of bods that were unable to get back to the station in time to for the operation. The first one went over quite easily, but the second one, the CO had that day asked me into his office, or called me into his office I should say, and offered me a commission. Well, that, of course, that night, as we were on briefing for the operation, he knew I was with the wrong crew. And he asked me what I was doing, and I had to tell him, and he said, well, don't do it again unless you let me know. He was quite happy that I was going with him, but he just wanted to know if we'd been shot down, who was in the plane. So anyway, apart from that, the other one was with a officer, an Australian officer, who was flying very near to his last operations. He had just lost 2 of his crew, and I took the place of one. That operation was Kiel. We had quite Kiel was quite a nasty operational centre, and it was where I had my worst operation, and that was later on, flying along the Kiel Canal at 500 feet, dropping 6 mines at different intervals, and at 500 feet, of course, being a height that we could be fired on from both sides of the canal without the Germans hitting one another. So it was more or less broad daylight with the amount of flashes from the guns firing at it. At 500 feet was so that the mines did not break up when they hit the water. Too high, too low could have meant the cases being fractured and the mines becoming useless. They were magnetic mines and would not have operated had they been broken up. But anyway, that was neither here nor there. My most hazardous trip of all was one that we were only flying for a couple of hours. We hit a thundercloud, which we called a QNIM, at about 24,000 feet, and fell like a stone to 4,000 feet when we pulled out. We were able to pull out, started to pull out at 12,000 feet, and the pull out was at 4,000 feet. We then went back up to about 12,000 feet, but we found that we were having a job maintaining the height. eventually got back to the station and landed with a full load of bombs and quite a heavy load of fuel steel, and the plane was then ordered to a remote part of the airfield where we quickly evacuated the plane as we'd still got bombs on, and we then went and had our meal, etc., and were asked why on earth we'd come back so early. Naturally, the briefing. Anyway, the plane was found to have had all the rivets pulled out of the wings, the front of the wings, which meant that the wings had opened up at the front and we weren't getting the lift that we should have had. The two outboard motors had been torn in their mountings and had dropped down to about 15 or 16 degrees, which meant they were pulling us down, which was the reason we couldn't maintain height on the way back. And the whole of the chassis was twisted, the fuselage, and also the wings were bent, the tailplane was bent, and we ended up, as I say, just managing to land, and we couldn't have gone round again. If we hadn't landed the first time, we could not have made it again.
So that was what you would describe as a wing as a prayer, is it?
Yeah, that's right. The plane was, the operation was notified to Avros and Chadwick, who designed the Lancaster, came down and had a look at it, and it was taken back to the factory where they put it through tests, and they decided that we must have been doing 570 miles an hour to do the damage that we'd done. And I've always considered that we flew the fastest bomber in the Second World War. I think, well, at least to survive. Probably plenty of the others that didn't, but we survived and also managed to survive the rest of our tour. Yeah, leave it now.
What do you put down you still being alive today to?
Well, with aircrew, of course, with bombers, a great deal was sheer luck. Probably 90% of it. The rest was having a perfect coordination between the crews, the crew itself. Every one of us learnt to do at least basically the other chaps' jobs. We were, of course, trained to do all the jobs except actually flying a plane, but I had learnt to fly before I went in the RAF, so I would have become a pilot, but for the fact that when they told me that a pilot's training was 2 years, but an air gunner was about 10 months. I'd opted for the air gunner job, and that's what I became.